Blake Masters wondered if anything could be worse than waking up on a strange sofa in a strange apartment with his head pounding and his stomach roiling. Through his bloodshot eyes, he observed his wife of 5 years and a neighbor coming down the hallway of the neighbor's apartment. She, dressed in the same clothes as last night but with her hair messed and her makeup gone, he, in a pair of boxer briefs that showed he was endowed way beyond average. They were both smiling brightly. Yes, he thought to himself, there is something that could be worse. Elaine Masters' smile turned to a frown when she saw her husband looking at her slack-jawed. She was hoping he would still be sleeping when she and Daryl Stevens were done having intimacy for the 3rd time since last night. She knew she was going to tell her husband about her activities, but she would have much preferred to do it in private after they returned to their own apartment, not in Daryl's apartment with him standing there smirking. "What the hell, Laney?" he yelled. "How could you do that to me?" The exertion proved too much for Blake. He doubled over and spewed the contents of his stomach on the carpet in front of the sofa. Both Laney and Daryl recoiled in disgust. "Hell, man, that's uncool," Daryl wailed. "Like what you two did wasn't?" Blake croaked. Daryl at least had the good grace to look contrite for a split second. "Come on, cheating woman. He can clean this mess up while we clean up your mess," Blake said, staggering toward the apartment door. Laney's first reaction was to help Daryl clean up the mess her husband had made, but hearing Blake call her a cheating woman rocked her back on her heels, so to speak. Because her husband of 5 years had never talked to her this way before, she figured discretion was the better part of valor and started toward the door behind him. "Laney," Daryl began, but stopped when the woman raised her hand to give him a visual stop sign. Laney waited silently while Blake struggled with the key in the lock of the apartment directly across the hall from Daryl's. When he finally got the door open, he staggered inside with Laney following. Crashing down on his own sofa, Blake worked his body into a position where he was half sitting, half laying. His eyes looked sunken and haunted. "What could you possibly say that I would want to hear, Laney?" Blake rasped. "You got what you wanted, even though you kept telling me you didn't want it." "Was it everything you hoped for?" Laney had gone over several options in her head in the few seconds from Daryl's apartment to the one she shared with her husband. She couldn't see any option working except the surprise element of the truth. "It was absolutely the best night of intimacy I've ever had in my life," she said calmly, showing no sign of fear or anxiety. "You saw the size of the weapon in his shorts. You've seen him in a Speedo. He knows how to use that thing. Twice last night and again this morning. While you slept passed out like a drunken monkey. I hope you're proud of yourself." Blake blushed at the accusation. He had never passed out from drinking before. Thinking back on the evening, he recollected only having 4 mixed drinks at the party before waking up on Daryl's sofa that morning. "What did that jerk give me last night? I only had 4 drinks." Blake started to respond. "Yeah, right," his wife replied, although she had to admit to herself that she had never seen her husband as out of it as he appeared to be last night. "Regardless, you're saying it's okay to cheat on me if I get drunk?" Blake asked. "When you embarrass yourself and me," Laney said, purposely not finishing her statement. Blake staggered into the kitchen and grabbed a handful of aspirin and a bottle of water. He then staggered into the shower. As the fog cleared from Blake's brain, he thought back over the last few months. He knew it was a matter of time before his wife betrayed him. She all but told him she would the first time she laid eyes on Daryl. With their careers starting to flourish, Blake and Laney had moved into the higher-end apartment complex 7 months ago. Several neighbors went out of their way to welcome the pair, including their neighbor across the hall. Daryl was outgoing and friendly, a handsome man who appeared to spend a lot of time in the gym. Blake noticed that the neighbor appeared to spend more time paying attention to his wife than to him, something that was not uncommon since Laney was a beautiful blonde with a fantastic body. Blake was a good-looking man, but he knew his wife was at the least a high 9 on a 10-point scale. Men hit on her on a regular basis, even in front of him sometimes, but until Darryl Hoff came along, his wife seemed immune to their charms. He watched as Lainey tried to play it cool with Darryl, but failed miserably. He caught her constantly sneaking looks at the man and flushing, but what really gave her away in Blake's mind was her denial of the attraction. When Blake pointed out in a casual conversation with her that Darryl was a handsome man, she blushed deeply, took a deep breath, and then uttered, I suppose so." Never before had his wife ducked a statement. Open communication was a hallmark of their relationship. No subject was off the table, even if they disagreed. Neither was afraid of a well-thought-out argument. Lainey's refusal to engage spoke volumes. Things only got a little worse the first time the pair encountered Darryl at the complex pool in the summer. The man appeared to be packing a large snake in his board shorts, and Blake saw that his wife definitely noticed. Blake was not going to sit idly by and watch as his wife was slowly seduced by his neighbor. Several times in the next few weeks, he subtly let it be known to both parties that he would not brook interference in his marriage by Darryl. "Have I ever given you any indication that I would cheat on you, babe?" Lainey said to him after he had again reminded her that he would not tolerate her breaking their vows. "Don't turn into a paranoid idiot." Blake watched his wife carefully over the next several weeks. He wasn't happy when she told him about Darryl's party coming up in 2 weeks, but felt he really couldn't justify staying away. There would be several other neighbors attending, as well as people from Darryl's workplace. Blake and Lainey walked across the hall about 5 minutes after the party started. They mingled with several neighbors and met several of Darryl's co-workers. After getting their second margaritas of the evening, they split apart to mingle on their own, something they often did at parties. Only this time, Blake made sure to keep his wife in view most of the time. He found it odd that she seemed to be avoiding their host. Blake didn't hesitate to accept his third margarita directly from Darryl. He never noticed that he was starting to feel buzzed after accepting the drink. He remembered having yet another margarita sometime later, but didn't remember much else until he woke up on Darryl's sofa. Darryl made sure that Lainey noticed her inebriated husband staggering around his apartment and slurring his speech while talking to other people at the party. "You never told me he was such a lightweight," he chuckled as Lainey looked at her husband and frowned. When the party finally broke up, Lainey and Darryl picked up the worst of the mess and put a blanket over the prone Blake. "It's karma, Lainey. He deserves what he gets, and you deserve to get some of this," Darryl said as he took the woman's hand and ran it down to his pants. She took another look back at her husband, then followed Darryl to his bedroom. She had been waiting for this day for almost 6 months. Lainey wasn't disappointed when she got into bed with Darry. His smile got even bigger as more clothes came off. She was every bit the goddess he imagined. He noticed that she never asked him to use protection, and he certainly wasn't offering. The pair snuggled for about 20 minutes before doing the deed a second time. Darryl was asleep 5 minutes later. Lainey got out of bed, went down the hall, and checked to make sure her husband was sleeping soundly. She looked at the prone form of her husband, smirked broadly, and went back to Darryl's room, sliding into bed up against the big man's back. She bucked her hips into those fingers as she awoke, wrapping her arms around her lover and giving him a passionate good-morning kiss. "Good morning, lover," she whispered. "Sleep well?" "Oh, yeah. Now how about we celebrate the morning before we wake up your loser husband," he said. Lainey frowned. Despite what she was doing at the moment, she still loved her husband and didn't feel comfortable with Darryl's spoken humiliation. "The least you could do is remember whose wife I am and try to show him a little respect," she said. "Yeah, okay," he responded back quietly. It was several minutes before they heard Blake stirring in the living room. Lainey was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee when Blake walked in. He poured himself a cup of coffee and went to his usual seat at the table. He sniffed the air a couple of times, smelling the leftover aroma of his wife's betrayal. "You need to shower," he said blankly. "After we talk," she answered. "Just don't tell me it didn't mean anything. It was just intimacy, Blake growled. Fair enough, because it wasn't just intimacy. I won't lie to you. It was the best intimacy of my life, she announced. So you've already said, so I guess I'll believe you, he said. So you know I'm going to want to do that again. I would think that if you truly love me, you would want to give me that experience again. Is that what he told you to ask for, or is that your own original thought? Either way, I won't share you with him. I've had you for 5 years, so I guess it's his turn for the next 5 years. Wait, what? She responded, looking confused. You're going to give me to him? I'm not some possession that you can just give away. But you're also not some possession that I own. Apparently, I won't be able to stop you from lovemaking with him again in the future, so why even try? You can go to him and be his girlfriend, love buddy, whatever. No sharing. You can be his completely. She scrunched her nose, and she said that she was trying to think through a problem. What if I don't want to be his? I'm already yours, she said. We're mine, babe. I knew this day was coming. How could you know that? I didn't even know that, she asserted. Apparently, I know you better than you know yourself. Did you ever consider that? Blake said. Up until a few months ago, Blake thought he had married the perfect woman. Beautiful, swimsuit model's body, brains, and personality. She could be a bit of a know-it-all, which he found an endearing quality, and was independent enough that she didn't feel she needed to always be on the arm of a boyfriend. Blake and his roommate were at a party on campus at their Midwestern University in their junior years when Lainey and 2 friends made an entrance. Blake noticed that all 3 women were beautiful, but since he had a thing for redheads, he focused in on Lainey, who was a sophomore. Apparently, so did a lot of other guys at the party, because it took almost 2 hours for Blake to finally get the opportunity to introduce himself. Or plead his case, he noted to himself. Under normal circumstances, I'd offer to get you a drink, but my mama didn't raise no fools. I waited 2 hours to get a chance to talk to you. If I leave you alone for a minute, I'll never get the chance to talk to you again tonight, Blake said. Lainey giggled, and Blake was hooked. She seemed happy to be in his company as well. The 2 lived together for their last 2 years of school. Blake was a pharmacy major with a 5-year course schedule, so the 2 graduated the same year. They were married a year after that. Neither was a virgin when they met, but they also weren't exactly players. They learned from each other as life went on, and both seemed happy with what the other brought to the table. Until Lainey wasn't, Blake noticed. When Lainey got out of the shower, Blake was nowhere to be found. She walked across the hallway and knocked on Daryl's door. He was surprised to see the woman at his door. Wow. Did he let you come back? Daryl questioned. He apparently doesn't care. Told me you could have me. Left when I got into the shower, Lainey said in a clipped tone. Huh? Any man who would give you up is a moron. Come on in. Lunch? He asked. Thinking with his small brain, Daryl spent much of the afternoon trying to convince the woman to move in with him. He would throw away his current girlfriend in a heartbeat if he could have Lainey, he thought to himself. Spurred on by Daryl, Lainey spent much of the afternoon raging against her husband. It's my body, and I'll give it to anybody I want, so damn him, she yelled at one point while she paced around Daryl's apartment. He's letting me go! Ha! I'll go with whom I want. He can stay home and play with his little toy for all I care. Daryl smirked at Lainey's last statement. While Lainey had told him Blake was average size, that was small compared to his own. He knew his conditioning of Lainey's thinking was working. What wasn't working at that moment, however, was Daryl's attempt to get Lainey back into his bed. She was pacing, stomping, and howling against her husband. Intimacy was the last thing on her mind at that moment. Blake spent the afternoon with several friends at a sports bar eating wings and drinking beer. He called ahead to his favorite pizza restaurant for a carry-out pizza and returned to the apartment at about 6:30. He assumed Lainey was across the hall having intimacy with Daryl when he didn't see her in their apartment. Lainey heard the door to her apartment slam closed and was out the door of Daryl's apartment in a shot. You coward! She screamed at him as she burst into her own apartment. Where were you? This is my body, and I can do whatever I want with it, he yelled back. I've been eating wings and drinking beer with it. Now I'm about to eat pizza with it. What the Lainey asked, completely flabbergasted. Pizza? I got a large. Not enough to include Jerk Darrell, though, Blake said quietly. He looked his wife over from head to toe, noting that her makeup was on straight and her hair was still in place, so to speak. Did I interrupt your plans? I thought Mr. Jerk would be knee-deep inside you at this point, pardon the pun, Blake said. Not funny, Lainey huffed, pulling 2 plates out of the cabinet. The pair sat down to eat in silence. 5 minutes in, Lainey asked the question she was afraid of, which to get the answer. So where do we go from here, Blake? I'm going to stay here until our lease is up in 5 months. I'm assuming you're going across the hall, Blake answered. I don't want to go across the hall. I don't want a divorce. The intimacy was great, but you're my man, my husband, she said. But I don't share. I won't share. You made that choice for both of us last night. You've got buyer's remorse? Blake queried. I made a poor decision last night, but everybody makes a mistake. Surely you can forgive one mistake. A poor decision, no doubt, but not a mistake. A mistake would be doing it once, but doing the same thing twice last night and once more this morning, come on. Don't insult my intelligence. You two set the stage. I'm pretty sure I got drugged and then you followed your game plan, Blake said. You wanted him. He wanted you. You both got what you wanted. The only one out of anything here is me, but I'll get over it someday. It's too late to be worrying about me now. Lainey sat quietly crying. I don't want to go, Blake. I want to stay here, she sobbed. Pack a bag, babe. Go back to Loverboy. Darrell was all smiles when he answered the door later that evening. Lainey grimaced as she walked in with a bag in her hand. It was obvious she had been crying heavily. Darrell took one look at her face and knew there wouldn't be a repeat of last night on this night. Not only did the two not have intimacy, but Darrell couldn't even persuade Lainey to share his bed that night. She slept on Darrell's sofa, wearing a t-shirt and a ratty pair of sweatpants. Lainey was still sleeping when there was a loud knocking on Darrell's door. She glanced at a clock on the wall and shivered when she saw it was just 6:24. Who would be knocking on someone's door this early on a Sunday morning, she wondered as she staggered to answer the knock. Elaine Masters? Asked a young woman who looked to be barely out of high school. It took Lainey a split second to realize the young woman was addressing her. The only place she was ever called by her full first name was at her job or at her parents' home. She nodded mutely at the girl when recognition came to her brain. You have been served, the young woman exclaimed in a tone much too cheery for the hour, Lainey thought. Who gets served on Sunday morning? Lainey mumbled. You do, the young woman replied before turning on her heel and leaving. Lainey walked over to the sofa, retrieved her keys, and stomped back across the hall and into her apartment. Get up, you coward! She screamed as she marched into the bedroom where Blake lay sleeping. How the hell did you get a divorce petition done in just one day? She yelled to her husband. Remember I said I might know you better than you know yourself. Well, I'd had those papers done for about a month, knowing it was only a matter of time. I called over to the attorney's office yesterday and paid a little OT to get it delivered today, he answered. Lainey's bluster died with Blake's explanation. Had she really been that obvious, she wondered? Dividing the couple's assets down the middle was fairly easy, especially since they didn't own a house and didn't have children to worry about. As Blake figured, Lainey moved across the hall while he kept the apartment until the lease was up. It took about 2 weeks for Lainey to accept the situation in her mind, and until that happened, Darrell couldn't get the woman back into his bed. When she did go back to his bed, it still wasn't as good as it was on the first night, Darrell noted. A couple of weeks after Blake filed, he got a phone call from his mother-in-law. He had always gotten along well with his in-laws, so he had no idea what to expect. You pulled the trigger awfully quick, Blake. What are we missing? His mother-in-law asked. "What has she told you happened, Mom?" he asked in return. "She said she made a mistake on one day, and you filed the next." "Really, that quickly? What's this mistake that she's trying not to tell me about?" "What she's trying not to tell you is that she cheated on me 3 times over a night and the next morning. She and the guy across the hall had been getting too friendly, I felt, and I warned her that one slip was one too many. I don't think she thought I'd jump this quickly, but she broke my heart and my trust." "I'm sorry, Blake. I knew you'd tell me the truth," his mother-in-law said. Blake picked up more hours at the pharmacy in an attempt to keep busy. Away from work, he spent more time at the gym, but less time with friends. Several friends tried to step up for him once they found out about the pending divorce, but the once affable Blake was fast becoming a hermit. Although Daryl had no fear of Blake from a physical standpoint, he still kept his distance from Lainey's husband, fearing that if Blake got irrational, he might have to defend himself and hurt the smaller man. That certainly wouldn't help his case with Lainey, who still seemed to be holding back with him since the divorce filing. Blake rarely talked to either Lainey or Daryl when they saw each other in the hallway or out in the parking lot. His wife was shocked at how quickly he gave up on her. "I thought he loved me enough to fight to keep me. I'm not exactly chopped liver, you know," she said to her mother in a phone call. "No, you're not chopped liver, but with your attitude, you're not exactly filet mignon either," her mother answered. Lainey gasped. "Whose side are you on, Mom?" "You may be my daughter, but if I'm taking sides, I'm taking Blake's. He did nothing to deserve your disrespect. I thought Dad and I raised you better than that," her mother said. With everything happening, Lainey didn't remember that she and Blake had been trying to have a baby when she started having intimacy with Daryl. She hadn't taken a birth control pill in more than 3 months. She never gave it a second thought when she woke up nauseous 3 mornings in a row. "You're on birth control, right?" Daryl asked. "Oh my God," Lainey whispered. Lainey's attorney tried to get the divorce delayed until after the child was born, but Blake's attorney was smart enough to point out that the pregnancy occurred after Daryl started sleeping with the woman, meaning the child definitely wasn't Blake's. Daryl was lying on his back in the dark, listening to the sound of his first child suckling on Lainey's left breast. Although he wasn't thrilled with the thought of being a father when Lainey announced she was pregnant 18 months before, the actuality of the baby was much better than he anticipated. He quickly fell in love with the infant. Unfortunately for Daryl, his feelings for the baby easily outstripped his feelings for the woman. Although he lusted after her, he certainly didn't love her. The intimacy ranged from good to great, but outside of that, the two were friends at best. Why did her ex-husband have to be such a Boy Scout? Daryl would have preferred Lainey to stay married to Blake and just make occasional forays across the hall. But Blake didn't like that idea and had her served divorce papers before that weekend was over. Lainey's thoughts at that moment weren't that much different from those of Daryl. She, too, thought the intimacy with Daryl was good to great, but she also would have preferred to have stayed with Blake. She loved Blake, and she would have loved to have given Blake a child. Instead, karma would have had Blake thinking about Lainey or Daryl at that exact moment, plotting revenge of some sort. He was too busy for that sort of thing at the moment, though, being in the middle with 2 young women. Maybe the best revenge is living a good life. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.